What's going on? I asked in confusion, seeing my in-laws unexpectedly appear at the doorstep alongside my husband. Never mind that, Oakland, my father-in-law said cheerfully. We have something to celebrate today. He opened our fridge and pulled out a beer. Celebrate? I repeated, bewildered, looking at their smug faces. I had no idea that the next words from my husband and his parents would make me question everything I thought I knew about my family. My name is Oakland. I'm 38 years old and work as a high school teacher. I married Jackson, an office worker who is 2 years older than me, 12 years ago. Soon after we got married, our only daughter, Bonnie, was born. Since then, my days have been filled with work and child rearing. Recently, I visited my hospitalized mother with my daughter. Oh, Grandma, it's been a while, Bonnie said enthusiastically. Well, well, Bonnie, welcome, my mother replied, lying in her bed and lovingly stroking her granddaughter's hair. Her hand was noticeably thinner, and her complexion looked poor. Next to my mother's bed stood a middle-aged man wearing glasses and a suit. I nodded towards him, and he returned the nod before leaving the room. Mom, who was that man? I asked curiously. Just an acquaintance, she replied, brushing off the question. Don't worry about it. More importantly, Oakland, are you still doing well? And Jackson, is he well? She asked. I'm fine, Mom, I assured her. And yes, Jackson is fine too. My mother's eyes, a shade close to blue, sparkled softly as she smiled. She had met my father, who ran an import-export business overseas, and came to the U.S. as his bride. Raising a child in a foreign country must have been hard, but my mother and father worked together to bring me up. One of the reasons I was able to work as a teacher was because my mother had taught me many things when I was small. I was deeply grateful to my parents, who had raised me with love in a wealthy family. After my father passed away a few years ago, my mother, now alone, fell ill and was hospitalized. She transferred the business to a relative and spent her remaining days quietly in the hospital. Is there anything you need, Mom? I asked. Just having you and Bonnie come to see me is more than enough, she said warmly. We stayed for a while, sharing stories and enjoying each other's company, but eventually it was time to leave. On the way home, Bonnie chatted about her day at school and a book she'd recently finished. She was at that tricky age of 10, but we got along well and I cherished our conversations. Even without parental bias, I thought she was a bright and honest child who was growing up well. We're home, I called out as we stepped inside. Oh, well, welcome back. How's my mother-in-law doing? Jackson asked, greeting us. Mom is as usual. How about you? Your seminar, was it? I replied. Oh, I heard some good stuff. Looking forward to the next one, he said enthusiastically. Lately, my husband had been attending seminars on how to leave his job and start a side business. I figured he wanted to earn more money, though his current job wasn't bad. It just wasn't with a top-tier company. With my salary, we were managing comfortably, so I couldn't understand his urgency. What bothered me most was his obsession with making more money, which I assumed came from his parents' influence. Their frugality and constant focus on finances always left a bad taste in my mouth. Ever since we got married, I had been put off by his parents' excessive stinginess and their habit of begging for small amounts of money whenever we saw them. Because of this, I had been keeping my distance. They had never given Bonnie any Christmas gifts. Fortunately, my in-laws lived far away, so we didn't have to interact much. My husband did well with household chores, so I guessed it was okay. As long as I had my mother, my husband, Bonnie, and our modest but ordinary life, I was content. Then, one day, I got a call from the hospital. My mother's condition had suddenly worsened and she was in critical condition. When we rushed to the hospital, my mother was barely breathing. Mom, Grandma, no, I sobbed, clutching her hand. Oakland, she said weakly, I've always wanted you to be happy. Cherish Bonnie more than anything. I love you. In the end, those were my mother's last words. My mother, who had raised me with all her heart alongside my father and adored Bonnie from the bottom of her heart, passed away. Her face in the coffin was peaceful, and all I could do was cry. My daughter was by my side, crying with me. A little while after my mother passed away, an envelope arrived at our house from a law firm. I was perplexed as I opened the envelope from an unfamiliar sender. Inside, I found a document that read, I have been entrusted with your mother's will. stating that she had left her entire inheritance to me. My mother and I had never discussed the subject of inheritance before, so I was taken aback. However, since the letter had indeed arrived, I decided to visit the law firm on my own. "Hello, I'm the attorney, Milo," the man greeted me. "You were in my mother's hospital room before," I said, recognizing him. "Yes, we met in the hospital room. Actually, from that time, I was entrusted by your mother," he explained. Hearing his gentle voice, I felt tears welling up, but then I was completely stunned. 170 million? I gasped, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Yes, Oaklyn. When your father passed away, you waived your right to the inheritance so your mother could receive it all. When you add that inheritance to your mother's personal assets, even after deducting taxes, this is the amount your mother has named you as the sole heir," he explained. My parents had indeed been wealthy, but I hadn't imagined that they had left such an inheritance. I had never asked my parents for money after getting married, and avoided the topic of inheritance as it seemed unlucky. Feeling dizzy, I realized this must be an expression of love from my mother. With that thought, I left the procedures to Milo. "Your mother cared about you more than anything," Milo said kindly. "She instructed me to assist you if necessary. Please feel free to discuss anything with me." "Thank you," I replied. "I appreciate your help." I bowed her head several times to Milo and left the room. Time passed, and it was around the time of my mother's 49th day memorial service. Jackson began to frequently ask about my mother's inheritance. "Have you received your mother's inheritance yet?" he asked one evening. "Jackson, please stop talking about it," I replied firmly. "I'm still mourning." My husband fell silent, but after some time, he would subtly bring it up again. The situation with my in-laws was even worse. At my mother's memorial service, my father-in-law approached me and said, "Oaklyn, if you're worried about the inheritance, we can help." "Huh?" I replied, caught off guard. "You know, we've had our fair share of disputes over inheritance. It can get complicated, especially when unmarried siblings are involved. If it's troubling you, don't hesitate to talk to us," he continued. My mother-in-law quickly added, "That's right. You can rely on us, too." Yes, I replied vaguely, feeling cornered. They had never shown any inclination to assist me before, so their sudden interest felt disingenuous. About 3 months after my mother's death, Jackson, who had been quiet recently, finally lost his patience. "Hey," he said one evening, "have you received your mother's inheritance yet?" A bad feeling swept over me quickly. I lied. "The procedures are complicated, so not yet." In reality, I had already completed the procedures and, upon Milo's advice, had deposited the passbook containing the inheritance in a safe deposit box, but it felt right to say that now. "Really?" Jackson pressed. "But it's been 3 months since your mother passed away, right? Haven't you done the procedures yet?" "Yeah, so what?" I replied. "Well, never mind, I'm going to bed," my husband concluded, heading to the bedroom in high spirits for some reason. With a nagging unease in my chest, I prepared for work the next day, and then headed to bed. The next day, as Bonnie and I were cleaning up after dinner, the doorbell rang. Bonnie hurried to the door, and when I poked my head out from the kitchen, I saw my husband's parents had dropped by unexpectedly, along with Jackson coming home from work. "What are they doing here?" my daughter asked, frowning. "It's not a big deal, Bonnie," my husband said to our daughter. "Go to your room." Bonnie glanced anxiously at us and headed to her room. "What's going on?" I asked, my frustration mounting. "Never mind that, Oaklyn," my father-in-law said cheerfully. "We have something to celebrate today." He opened our fridge and took out a beer. "Celebration?" I repeated, confused. "You've inherited over $100 million, haven't you?" my father-in-law announced, his voice brimming with triumph. "We've already started construction on a duplex, so we can all live together," my mother-in-law chimed in, her tone almost dreamy. "And it's going to have the most amazing modern kitchen, just like a dream," she added. "Excuse me? What are you even talking about?" I blurted out, completely stunned. "Come on, this is great news," Jackson said, flashing a smug smile. "We decided to go ahead with the duplex. We used half of our savings, and the money Mom and Dad had set aside for the down payment. The loan is in my name, but you can just pay it all off with your inheritance, right? It's only fair to give something back to them," he concluded. "Oh, and I quit my job. my husband added, looking rather pleased with himself. I'm planning to start a business, using the inheritance you got, of course. What? I exclaimed, my voice rising. What are you talking about? I already told you I haven't received the inheritance yet. And what's this about quitting your job and building a duplex? I asked indignantly. Stop lying, he snapped, his tone sharp. It's obvious you've already got the money. Why not celebrate a little? How about a trip to Hawaii before the house is ready? Jackson suggested. As the chaos unfolded, my husband and in-laws fueled each other's excitement, their voices overlapping, as they planned like everything was already decided. I just stood there, stunned by the absurdity of it all. Then Jackson turned to me with a contemptuous chuckle. You're a miser, Oakland. We've already dealt with this because you kept saying you didn't get the inheritance. You can't refuse an inheritance if you haven't made an inheritance within 3 months. It doesn't matter if you lied or told the truth about not formalizing, you still got the inheritance, right? Considering the size of my father-in-law's company, there must be over $100 million in there. Thanks to that, we'll be able to live comfortably. Thank you, my father-in-law. Don't forget to prepare the money for the 2-story house and my capital as soon as possible, he added in a demanding tone. My husband's words made me dizzy. What kind of people are these? I thought. They want to use my precious inheritance from my mother as they please and indulge in luxury. Although I was filled with anger and ready to scream, I could not utter a word, worrying for Bonnie, who was in the other room. I'm going outside for a bit, I said, but neither of them heard me. They were too busy happily discussing how they would dispose of the inheritance. I went out, without even taking my purse. The night wind was cool, and that's when the tears came to my eyes. I went to the park at the top of the hill where I usually went with my mom and cried, holding back my voice. My anger would not subside. Feeling frustrated and exhausted, I exploited my heart. My emotions were a mess, but I couldn't just say I wanted a divorce. We still had our child, Bonnie. My mother's words, "Take care of Bonnie above all else," came back to me, and the tears flowed again. Suddenly, someone spoke to me. I opened my eyes in surprise, and the person began to speak softly. 3 days later, I called my husband and mother-in-law to a restaurant with private rooms. So you did come home after that day after all, Jackson said mockingly. Did you withdraw the money, Oakland? You shouldn't leave the house without telling your husband, my mother-in-law added. Exactly, my father-in-law picked up on that. Ignoring the 3 people's words, I pulled out a document. It was an already filled-out divorce petition. Oakland, what are you doing? My husband asked, looking puzzled. This is a divorce petition, I replied firmly. Jackson, I want a divorce. What? What are you saying? He stammered, panic spreading across his face. My in-laws exchanged nervous glances as I continued. I can't live with you anymore. What are you talking about? Jackson's face flushed red as he lunged toward me. You're leaving us now? After getting the inheritance? You've changed because of the money, you stingy cheapskate, I snapped back. That's my line, Jackson. You've become completely out of control ever since I inherited my mother's estate. First you quit your job to start a business, then you decided we were going to live with your parents without even consulting me. You drained my savings to build a 2-family home, and now you're planning a trip to Hawaii. Who changed when the money came in? I can't stay with people like that. My mother-in-law intervened. Wait, you can't just divorce him like that. That's exactly right, Jackson's father said firmly. As a married couple, your savings are shared property, so half the inheritance should go to Jackson. That's exactly right, my mother-in-law chimed in. And if it comes to that, we'll take the $50 million ourselves. Jackson and his parents, flaming with anger, headed toward me hostilely. Before I could respond, the door to a private room swung open. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. Bonnie's calm voice rang out as she entered the room, her expression flat and calm. The inheritance Mom received is not considered community property, the daughter continued confidently. Isn't it, Mr. Milo? Standing beside her, Milo's attorney nodded measuredly. Jackson blinked confusedly. Bonnie? Who's this? I'm Milo's attorney, the man said evenly. Mother Oakland has entrusted her estate to me and I'm helping her with these matters. As Milo bowed politely, Jackson seemed flustered. Wait a minute, are you saying the inheritance isn't considered marital property? That's correct, Milo confirmed. Inherited property from a deceased parent does not become shared property, nor is it subject to the division of property. Jackson's voice rose in disbelief. What? You've got to be kidding me. Is this a mistake? I watched as my husband and his parents exchanged bewildered glances. They really seemed to believe the inheritance I received would become their property. Jackson slammed his fist on the table. In that case, it's even more reason not to divorce. I'll claim you no matter what. Bonnie stepped forward, her voice steady. Stop it already, Dad. She turned to face him. Since Mom suggested divorce? No. Since Mom inherited the estate? Have you ever thought about her once? Grandpa and Grandma only ever talk about money. They've never once mentioned me. I can't consider such people as family, she concluded. My husband and his parents froze, taken aback by my daughter's words. I remembered how, on the day I was crying about my inheritance, Bonnie had come running to me and said, Dad, Grandpa and Grandma are too much, trying to take Grandma's legacy for themselves. Mom, I'm on your side. Let's fight this together, she suggested. Those words gave me the courage to contact Milo and arrange this meeting. Jackson tried to regain his composure. Bonnie, that's not true. Dad just wants what's best for you, he said quickly. Exactly, Bonnie dear, my mother-in-law jumped in. You'd be much happier living with us, don't you think? She's right, my father-in-law added. A child shouldn't meddle in adult matters. My daughter sighed, looking exasperated. I'm going with Mom. I can't bear to be with you anymore. She turned her head away, her decision final. I took a deep breath and spoke firmly. Anyway, we've made up our minds. Bonnie and I will be leaving. Jackson's anger flared. Hey, I've never cheated, and you can't force a divorce. I'll hire a lawyer. We'll get that money one way or another. Milo stepped in, his tone calm yet authoritative. If that's the case, I will take care of it from here. The issue here is whether there are grave reasons for not continuing the marriage, quitting his job, using the household savings without permission, deciding to live together. And Bonnie is saying she can't bear it. There are various points we can argue. Moreover, Milo added, your daughter recorded the sound of all of you begging for Oakland's inheritance. That should also serve as evidence. My husband slumped in his chair, defeated, while his parents turned pale. After seeing that, Bonnie and I left the restaurant together. A year later, thanks to Milo's efforts, my divorce from Jackson was finalized. My daughter and I moved into the house my mother had lived in. But even then, there were several times when letters arrived saying, I love you, come back. And Jackson was seen loitering near Bonnie's school. Eventually, Milo helped us apply for a restraining order, and things quieted down. According to rumors, Jackson and his parents built a 2-family home as planned. However, I heard from neighbors that my retired in-laws had to work in a factory to make ends meet, and my ex-husband, unable to find work, was doing manual labor. The new 2-family house was filled with constant arguments, and the family became disliked by everyone in the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Bonnie and I lived peacefully, supporting each other. One day, she said, Mom, I want to study abroad in the country where Grandma grew up. I smiled. We decided to cut ties completely with my ex-husband and move overseas. Using a bit of my mother's inheritance, I ensured Bonnie could pursue her dreams. Now my daughter seems to be enjoying school every day, and I've started working as a teacher here. I hope these peaceful days continue, I thought, content with our new life.